on which the laws of nature operate. For example, the amount of entropy in the early universe, or the balance between matter and antimatter. Now, all of these constants and quantities fall into an extraordinarily narrow range of life-permitting values. Were these constants or quantities to be altered by even a hair's breadth, the life-permitting balance would be destroyed and life would not exist. For example, if the force of gravity or the atomic weak force were altered by as little as 1 part out of 10 to the 100th power, the universe would not have been life-permitting. Now, there are only 3 possible explanations of this extraordinary fine-tuning: either physical necessity, chance, or design. Now, it can't be due to physical necessity because, as we've seen, the constants and quantities are independent of the laws of nature. In fact, string theory predicts that there are 10 to the 500th power different possible universes compatible with nature's laws. So, could the fine-tuning be due to chance? Well, the problem with this alternative is that the odds against the fine-tunings occurring by accident are so incomprehensibly great that they cannot be reasonably faced. The probability that all of the constants and quantities would fall by chance alone into the life-permitting range is vanishingly small. We now know that life-prohibiting universes are vastly more probable than any life-permitting universe. So, if the universe were the product of chance, the odds are overwhelming that the universe would be life-prohibiting. Hence, we may argue as follows. Premise 1, the fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. 2, it is not due to physical necessity or chance. 3, therefore, it is due to design. And thus, the fine-tuning of the universe implies the existence of a designer of the cosmos. Number 3, God is the best explanation of objective moral values in the world. If God does not exist, then objective moral values do not exist. By objective values, I mean values that are valid and binding independently of whether anybody believes in them or not. Many theists and atheists alike concur that if God does not exist, then moral values are not objective in this way. Michael Ruse, a noted philosopher of science, explains, the position of the modern evolutionist is that morality is a biological adaptation, no less than our hands and feet and teeth. Considered as a rationally justifiable set of claims about an objective something, ethics is illusory. I appreciate that when somebody says, love thy neighbor as thyself, they think they are referring above and beyond themselves. Nevertheless, such reference is truly without foundation. Morality is just an aid to survival and reproduction, and any deeper meaning is illusory. Like Professor Ruse, I just don't see any reason to think that in the absence of God, the herd morality evolved by Homo sapiens on this planet is objective. On the atheistic view, some actions, say rape, may not be socially advantageous, and so in the course of human development, it's become taboo. But that does absolutely nothing to prove that rape is really wrong. On the atheistic view, there's nothing really wrong with your raping someone. But the problem is that objective values do exist, and deep down, I think we all know it. There's no more reason to deny the objective reality of moral values than the objective reality of the physical world. Actions like rape, cruelty, and child abuse aren't just socially unacceptable behavior. They're moral abominations. Ruse himself admits in another context, the man who says it is morally acceptable to rape little children is just as mistaken as the man who says 2 plus 2 equals 5. Some things, at least, are really wrong. Similarly, love, equality, and self-sacrifice are really good. Hence, our argument can be summarized as follows. Premise 1, if God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist. 2, objective moral values do exist, but then it follows logically and inescapably that 3, therefore, God exists. Number 4, the historical facts concerning the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus imply God's existence. The historical person, Jesus of Nazareth, was a remarkable individual. Historians have reached a consensus that Jesus came on the scene with an unprecedented sense of divine authority, the authority to stand and speak in God's place. He claimed that in himself the kingdom of God had come, and as visible demonstrations of this fact, he carried out a ministry of miracle working and exorcisms. But the supreme confirmation of his claim was his resurrection from the dead. If Jesus really did rise from the dead, then it would seem that we have a divine miracle on our hands and thus evidence for the existence of God. Now, most people would probably say that the resurrection of Jesus is something you just believe in by faith or not. But there are actually 3 established facts recognized by the majority of historians today, which I believe are best explained by the resurrection of Jesus. Fact number 1, on the Sunday after his crucifixion, Jesus' tomb was found empty by a group of his women followers. According to Jakob Kramer, an Austrian specialist in the study of the resurrection, by far most scholars hold firmly to the reliability of the biblical statements about the empty tomb. Fact number 2, on separate occasions, different individuals and groups of people saw appearances of Jesus alive after his death. According to the prominent New Testament critic Gert Ludemann, it may be taken as historically certain that the disciples had experiences after Jesus' death in which Jesus appeared to them as the risen Christ. These appearances were witnessed not only by believers, but also by unbelievers, skeptics, and even enemies. Finally, fact number 3, the original disciples suddenly came to believe in the resurrection of Jesus, despite having every predisposition to the contrary. Jews had no belief in a dying, much less rising Messiah. And Jewish beliefs about the afterlife precluded anyone's rising from the dead before the end of the world. Nevertheless, the original disciples came to believe so strongly that God had raised Jesus from the dead that they were willing to die for the truth of that belief. N.T. Wright, an eminent British New Testament scholar, concludes, "That is why, as a historian, I cannot explain the rise of early Christianity unless Jesus rose again, leaving an empty tomb behind him." Attempts to explain away these 3 great facts, like the disciples stole the body or Jesus wasn't really dead, have been universally rejected by contemporary scholarship. The simple fact is that there just is no plausible naturalistic explanation of these facts. And therefore, it seems to me the Christian is amply justified in believing that Jesus rose from the dead and was who he claimed to be. But that entails that God exists. And so we have a good inductive argument for the existence of God based on Jesus' resurrection. Number 1, there are 3 established facts about Jesus: the empty tomb, post-mortem appearances, and the origin of the disciples' belief. 2, the hypothesis God raised Jesus from the dead is the best explanation of these facts. 3, the hypothesis God raised Jesus from the dead entails that the God revealed by Jesus exists. And finally, 4, therefore the God revealed by Jesus exists. Finally, my last point, number 5, God can be immediately known and experienced. This isn't really an argument for God's existence. Rather, it's the claim that you can know that God exists wholly apart from arguments, simply by immediately experiencing